Hi everyone, this is Allison Henson. I am facilitating session 12, chapter 30 about counseling families, and this chapter was written by Sydney Moon. So, we are going to be talking about two things in this chapter, parent guidance and family therapy, and we're also going to be talking about applications for each and models of each. A quote that I have here on the left is that neither type of family counseling has been extensively researched. Most of the literature on family counseling is characterized by informal clinical reports, case studies, and theoretical speculation. And then, like I said, we're going to have two types of family counseling. So, parent guidance can take several forms. It could be school counseling, school psychology, career development. It's a developmental perspective, though, not a therapeutic one, so you're acting more like a teacher than a physician. It's focused on prevention of social and emotional problems through timely early intervention, and the most commonly used model of parent guidance is this three-step model, where you assess individual traits, interpret test results, and use those test results to recommend future action. There are several applications to families of gifted children. So the first is just presenting the problems. This mainly addresses school issues, parenting concerns, and social emotional development. And there's some literature that addresses family relationships, but especially literature involving gifted children, there's really not much out there. And we're going to talk about that more throughout this presentation. There's also school issues. So many parents don't know how to support their gifted child properly or what their role should be with the school as a parent of a gifted child. So some parents have unrealistically high expectations for the school and become very upset when those expectations aren't met. And there's a lot of examples of that in the text. Colangelo and Detman developed a model that predicts parent stress and conflict when parent and school beliefs about gifted education aren't the same. And when this happens, school issues are likely to be the primary presenting problem in guidance work with parents of gifted children. So, some more applications to families of gifted children. There's also parenting concerns. Hackney found 5 main concerns among parents of gifted children, and those are parent roles, self-views, family adaptations, neighborhood and community influences, family and school interactions. Some parents may feel anxiety, guilt, and pressure over the responsibility of raising a gifted child and helping them to reach their potential. And the pressures these parents feel have some basis in reality, since several longitudinal studies have confirmed the importance of the family context in enabling gifted children to actualize their talents. The chapter also talks about some cultural differences. So they talk about how Chinese parents tend to feel a lot of shame when their gifted child underachieves in school. But in contrast, parents of some African American children in the United States can be threatened by high achievement because they perceive that school achievement will draw their child away from family and community. There's also social and emotional development. So gifted children have unique obstacles that they must overcome. Peer relationships, emotional adjustment, social adjustment, and stress management are just a few of those obstacles. They also have the obstacle of asynchronous development, and we've talked a lot about this in this class, talking about how they may be very developed academically, but not as developed socially. And so that can be something that can be very difficult for gifted children to navigate. Parents of gifted children may also benefit from differentiated preventative counseling, focused on helping them help their child cope with stressors that are unique to giftedness. So, we're going to talk about some models of parent guidance counseling. So most models have 3 main parts. They have an assessment of the child's types and levels of academic abilities, an interpretation of that assessment, and then recommendations for the parents and the schools regarding those results. Some models also include advocacy with the schools or a focus on social and emotional development. And there are 3 main examples of parent guidance counseling models that the chapter discusses. So the first is Silverman's developmental model. And this is especially good for use with parents of highly gifted students. Gifted students are super complex, and this model helps parents to create an environment for them when they're trying to figure themselves out. And this is also a preventative model for future problems. So while students may not be presenting problems currently, by using this model, you're setting yourself up for success in future problems. The goal of this model is to facilitate optimal development, and the focus is on moral values like altruism and contributions to society, as well as creativity and achievement. In this model, Silverman refers to self, and that self refers to both student and parent. This model is most appropriate for implementation by psychologists in private practice because it is comprehensive and individualized. Some concerns of Silverman's developmental model. There are 6 main concerns, but they include the assessment of the child's giftedness, parental perceptions, school concerns, peer relationships, community resources, and parental development. So the next model is the Counseling Center in Hamburg. And the focus is on parents of gifted children who are underachieving or who have behavior problems. And there are 5 key tasks for this counseling center. Those are giving information, counseling, and guidance to parents and students, helping teachers plan differentiated accommodations for gifted children with behavioral issues, giving information to parents, classes for psychologists and teachers, information for pediatricians and child guidance centers. In this counseling center, the parents answer background questions and then attend an initial session where children and parents are interviewed separately, and counseling decisions are made after interviews. Flowcharts have been developed to guide decisions at the counseling center. And these are those flowcharts where basically the counselors will either answer yes or no, and it guides them to the decisions that they should make. And this helps for the entire counseling center to be more standardized in the solutions that they are giving to their clients. The last that we're going to talk about in regards to parent guidance is the Ball State School Psychology Clinic. So the goal of this psychology clinic was to provide comprehensive assessments of gifted students and assist parents in advocating for appropriate school services. And it's implemented by school psychologists in training. The evaluations usually lasted 2 days and took several hours, so they're very timely evaluations. They included parent interviews and individualized student testing. Now, the least amount of tests that you would go through in this psychology clinic was 5, but the most was 20, and most of the students ended up taking 8 tests. The tests would include evaluations for intelligence, achievement, learning styles, personality, and behavior, but some students also took specialized tests depending on their needs. Every single evaluation at this psychology clinic had a written report completed, and the clinic supervisor read and assessed every single report and made suggestions regarding the report before it went back to the parents, which is another instance of how this is a very timely clinic. Parents were then brought in to explain the testing and provide recommendations, and recommendations could be curriculum compacting, differentiation of programming, or individual counseling. Family therapy. So this is our second big group. Family therapy is grounded in systems theory, and that means that they focus on the interaction between family members. They view family issues as circular and reciprocal instead of linear. So, for example, they want to know how the children are affecting their parents, but they also want to know how the parents are influencing their children. There are very few family therapists that specialize in helping families of gifted children because most of those families seem very high functioning. Family therapists tend to focus on severe disorders, low socioeconomic status, and families that have multi-problems. But that's really unfortunate because we are pretty positive that family therapy could be very effective for gifted families as well. Some applications to families of gifted children. There are developmental issues, and these are all the same developmental issues as parental guidance, but it helps to have a family therapist in this situation because they have an excellent understanding of family dynamics, they're familiar with principles of effective parenting, and they have creative and complex counseling strategies. However, most family therapists, like I mentioned, are not trained on cognitive assessment or school issues, so they would either need training in that or a partner or another therapist who understands schools. Family relationships and family transitions. Family therapy is an excellent approach for these type of things. They have a huge influence on the social and emotional adjustment of not only gifted children, but just children in general. The chapter also talks about how family therapy can be very helpful when talking about sibling relationships and how those relationships could be improved because of how giftedness affects siblings. It's possible that siblings might get jealous of the sibling who is identified as gifted, or that the gifted sibling may underachieve because they feel guilty that they are gifted and their sibling is not. This is also helpful in functional families that are experiencing major life changes, and those could be moving to a different state, the death of a family member. All of those types of things could be very helpful to have family therapy. Family therapy is also very helpful in underachievement. So underachievement can involve individual factors like low self-esteem, school factors, or family factors, and it's usually a mix of those. But underachievement is not always a result of family dysfunction. Sometimes family dysfunction is a result of underachievement. And since underachievement is so complex, the interventions for that is for underachievement are complex as well. So the chapter talks about a lot of different theories that people have and ways that underachievement can be solved by family therapy. Windorf and Frey talked about problem families versus clinical families. So they said that problem families are marginally functional families that were overwhelmed by a poor school situation, and the services that they would receive would include assessment and sessions with school faculty to improve child's programming, but family therapy could be effective as well. And clinical families are families with dysfunctional interaction patterns, and those are treated with structural strategic family therapy, which we're going to talk about in just a second. It may be possible to reverse underachievement through interaction with the family system, even when the school system is involved in the etiology of the underachievement. The chapter also talks about twice exceptional children. Twice exceptional children are often misunderstood, and that makes them very vulnerable to social and emotional problems. Families could feel helpless and frustrated, so parenting becomes very challenging. Family therapists need to be informed about giftedness and the disability, which is rare to have them understand both things very deeply. And because of this, we don't know what the best practices and interventions are. There's also some family therapy that could be very helpful for gifted individuals who are in the LGBT community. And the article talks about how the coming out process is very difficult for those individuals, so therapy could be very helpful in those times. Child internalizing and externalizing disorders. Family therapy is strongly recommended for children with emotional or behavioral disorders, so that the therapist can figure out how related to family dynamics the child's problems may be and to involve families in the child's treatment. No research has been done on whether or not differentiation in family therapy would be effective, but it's super likely that it would be beneficial. And Bordeaux believes that differentiated family therapy is a necessity, and that clear expectations between families and therapists have to be made before therapy can occur. And there's a comic right there that says, "For a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree." As we know, that is not possible for all of those animals. So I just thought that was funny and a good representation of why differentiation is so important. There are 3 family therapy models: systematic approaches, postmodern approaches, and integrated approaches. Systematic approaches, the chapter talks about the Bellin Blank Center for Family Counseling and the Assessment Program. So it's very brief and strength-based, so families are finding their own strengths to help them solve their own problems. And it talks about all of the different assessments that are used to help find solutions to problems that families may have. Also, the structural strategic approach, which I talked about earlier. So that talks about how the family is a system, and social emotional problems are a part of the family system, not just individuals in the family. It focuses on assessing and changing family interaction patterns, and that model with Windorf and Frey that we talked about earlier is part of that. So they have a 2-part assessment that talks about the child's academic history and family dynamics, and at the end of the assessment, families are separated into problem families and clinical families like we talked about. Next is imaginative or postmodern approaches. This is mainly done through a man named Volker Thomas at Purdue University, and he uses fairy tales and creative narrative therapy strategies. And this uses the creativity of gifted students and their families. And one example was a child named David and the family